I'm going to speak as someone who lives and works in the city, and just echo what Amber said about, being a farmer who doesn't own land. I think one of the biggest issues in cities is just land access. It is so difficult to have people in communities of color that are facing food apartheid to eat healthily or to have access to good food without making land accessible to folks to grow food. I think that's one of the biggest issues we have. We have so many people who go through, farm school and all these like farm training programs, and then they come out and what happens? So you have this wealth of resources, people who are knowledgeable and talented and passionate, and there's no land for them to work on. And most of them move outside of the city to grow food. And then we're left with, people living in the city without food access. And in 2020, we're dealing with COVID and our communities are devastated. Our community is completely devastated because we don't have the access to healthcare. We don't have the access to good food. We don't have the knowledge within our communities to be able to grow food for ourselves. And there's no structure in place to make that happen. So I think for me, that's like the biggest thing. We can't talk about access to good food and health without also talking about land. There are 596 acres of empty lots right now in New York City, right? And they're sitting empty for what?
What's that number again, Yemi?
596 acres. 596. And there's a website.
Come on with it.
I think it's called 596acres.com, right? Mm-hmm. Sitting empty. Because what? For what reason? And it's like, it's jumping hoops to get access to land. Those who do have access to land through the Parks Department, through Green Thumb, I'm calling them out, also have to deal with all kinds of restrictions. People have land being snatched up from under them constantly, right? So there's a whole infrastructure system that constantly puts us as a deficit. And, I have so many young people that come to my farm and say, hey, I want to be a farmer. I want to be a farmer. How can I do this? And I'm always like, well, how can you do this? How can you do this? Where is the infrastructure? Where's the land? Where's the support system? How do you get started? Where's the money? When they're like, people doing these fancy growing systems indoors and on rooftops and are raising millions of dollars to do it through venture capitalists. How does, a 20-year-old, a 25-year-old, 30-year-old person of color from East New York, I live in Ocean Hill. How do you actually set out to become a farmer in New York City? What infrastructure is in place for you to do this? It's impossible. And how do you serve your community? Because you've gone through the work of getting the knowledge, and how do you put that knowledge to serve your community? There's no infrastructure in place. Me doing it is not enough. Mm-hmm. It's just not enough. There needs to be more people that can do it. I don't even know how I'm able to do it, honestly. It shouldn't be by chance. It shouldn't be by accident. It shouldn't be people working for nonprofits for barely anything per hour on a seasonal basis and having no life, and working their bodies to death. There are just so many, we don't talk about that enough, how most of these urban farming jobs are, really indentured servitude for most of it, because you're working with no health care, you're working long, hard hours, you're barely getting paid. There's that system. And then there's the other level where you have folks from, higher socioeconomic levels that are willing to do that work for cheap. They're willing to do that work for nothing because mommy and daddy can pay the bills. And then it's making it even more difficult for those of us who want to do this for a living and need to be able to make a good living, not able to do that. So there's just so many things in infrastructure that makes it difficult. So I feel all the time that like I'm working in a vacuum or even speaking in a vacuum. One of the things that I try to do is show people how they can do little things for themselves at home, so that you can support yourself either as an individual or family, because there is no infrastructure in place to do it on a citywide level or community-wide levels. People are trying and doing their best, but you're doing it also knowing that land can be snatched from you at any moment. It's stressful.